As his forces struggle to make any real progress on the ground, the point where Russia has been making fake claims of city captures, Vladimir Putin knows that he always has his massive arsenal of long-range drones and missiles to fall back on. Scores of long-range drones fired by Russia into Ukraine have been doing enormous damage, and Putin can keep up those attacks for as long as supplies allow. Ukraine knows this as well as Putin, and it's doing something about it. Ukraine just scored a direct hit against Putin's war machine that has broken the backbone of Russia's drone-based strategy. Worst of all for Putin, that strike was just the beginning of a series of attacks that left Russia burning. On January 13th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine's security service, or SBU, had confirmed the completion of a strike that hit right at the heart of Russia's drone production. That strike took place in Taganrog, which is in the Rostov Oblast, overnight, and it caused a massive blaze in addition to a series of loud explosions that suggest that Ukraine's drones may well have struck gold by taking out munitions along with the Taganrog facility's means of drone production. The SBU released its own statement delivering the key information about the strike. The SBU's Alpha Special Operations Center, together with units of the Ukrainian Navy's Forces and Equipment Group, struck the production buildings of the Atlant Aero plant, located in Taganrog, Rostov Oblast, Russia, the SBU declared, adding, "As a result of the strikes, a series of loud explosions and a fire were observed at the site." The SBU went on to point out that Atlant Aero takes part in the full cycle of Russian drone production, from design through to the manufacturing of a specific type of drone, and that this latest attack was another in a long-running series. Ukraine has been hitting Russia's logistics and production facilities hard ever since it gained the capability to attack Russian territory. And it does it because every production line that is halted or logistical node that is destroyed could mean dozens, if not hundreds, of Ukrainian lives saved. Plus, it often leads to more Russian deaths on the battlefield. Ukraine is whittling away at Putin's war machine, and Taganrog offers the latest example of how. News Sky has its own report on the SBU's latest strike, which shares a handful of details about how Ukraine managed to pull off the whole thing. The outlet points out that it wasn't drones that Ukraine used to take out the Atlant Aero plant. This time, Ukraine used missiles, which are typically capable of delivering far greater explosive force than the long-range drones Ukraine has used for such strikes in the past. Those missiles targeted the drone manufacturing plant's production buildings and workshops, both of which are needed for the assembly of the drones that Russia has been launching into Ukraine. The same outlet says that Ukraine didn't only target production facilities with its missiles, it also hit some of Atlant Aero's testing facilities, which will make the design of future Russian drones much more difficult to complete. Plus, Ukraine hit workshops responsible for building electronic warfare or EW system elements, which is more important than it might seem. When Russia isn't able to build EW systems, it loses out on an air defense strategy that makes up for its more tangible defense's collective failure to stop long-range strikes. EW can send drones and missiles off course, but that won't happen when those systems aren't being built. Perhaps Atlant Aero even made EW systems for itself. If that's the case, look for a double tap on this particular plant in the near future. Ukraine will want to take advantage of Atlant Aero's lack of EW systems while it can. As for why Ukraine will want to hit the plant again, we've already touched on one of the reasons. Atlant Aero is a full-cycle drone production plant, meaning that it has facilities that enable Russia to take drones from basic concept to production. Specifically, News Sky says that the plant manufactures components that are used in Russia's Orion drones, along with components required for some Russian first-person view or FPV drones, as well as the previously mentioned EW systems. However, far and away the Atlant Aero plant's most important function is the production of Russia's long-range Molnia drones. One of the earliest additions to Russia's long-range drone arsenal, these drones are notable because they're cheap, effective, and very easy to produce as long as Russia has a working facility. Trap Aggressor published a general profile on this particular drone, as well as an upgrade that Russia has in the works in October 2025. It revealed that all that Russia needs to build these drones is plywood, styrofoam, and some components that it's able to buy from China. Simplicity, then, is the drone's big advantage, along with its affordability. The end result of Atlant Aero putting all of these parts together is a strange wooden drone that looks more like a DIY project than it does a legitimate weapon, but looks can be deceiving. Since 2023, Russia has been mass-producing this weapon and using it in attacks against frontline cities like Kharkiv. Molnia isn't the most impressive drone. It's usually used to attack Ukrainian rear zones up to 40 kilometers or about 24.8 miles away, though it has been known to travel further. And the payload of between 3 and 5 kilograms or 6.6 and 11 pounds is far from the most impressive delivered by Russia's long and medium-range weapons. That's assuming that Russia doesn't pack its cheap drone with TM-62 mines that double the original version's maximum firepower. But what the Molnia offers is cost-effective production combined with the sort of adaptability that would make Ukraine proud. At the time of Trap Aggressor's report, Russia had supposedly developed a mother drone version of Molnia that was capable of deploying FPV drones to a location. Those drones would then detach from mount units built onto the Molnia, at which point they could fly further than the Molnia is able to conduct attacks deeper into Ukraine's territory. Trap Aggressor says that Russian media is already reporting that one Molnia managed to travel 60 kilometers, or about 37 miles, into Ukraine before unleashing FPV drones and conducting a strike itself. There has also been talk of implementing artificial intelligence into the drone, though that seems to amount to the installation of a video tracker that may or may not have true AI capabilities. Still, this is a drone that Ukraine wants to take out of the skies. It also happens to be a drone that has inspired Ukraine's own manufacturers. As United 24 media reported in August, a rare example of Ukraine copying a Russian innovation has taken place. Ukraine has taken to building its own Molnia drones, though the Ukrainian clone comes with a few twists. Named the Bliskavka, the Ukrainian version of Russia's drone maintains the same basic design and layout, United 24 media says. It also has a similar range and payload. However, Ukraine has managed to drive the cost per drone down to approximately $857, and it's configured the drone for remote and autonomous operation, along with tweaking it so it can carry different types of munitions. It's the Molnia, but better. And that brings us back to what the SBU did on the night of January 13th. Taganrog's Atlant Aero plant appears to be the main production facility for Russia's version of this drone, which makes it a natural target for Ukraine. There's nothing that Ukraine can do about Russia getting its hands on the cheap parts needed to make the Molnia, and it also can't do anything about that drone costing Russia practically nothing in military spending terms to build. But what it can do is take away facilities, take away workshops, strip Russia of the tools that it needs to build the Molnia. A nail is useless without the hammer that knocks it into the wall, and Ukraine's goal on January 3rd was to take Russia's Molnia hammer away. Ukraine was extremely successful. In its report on the SBU's strike, the Kyiv Post highlighted that there is plenty of evidence that suggests Ukraine scored a direct hit on Atlant Aero beyond the statement that the SBU has shared. Much of that evidence comes from Russian Telegram channels, which are reporting that Ukraine's attack started at about 5 a.m. Kyiv time, and that it indeed led to the fires and explosions that the SBU claims. Russia's Excelenova Plus Telegram channel has also been busy posting photographs and footage that appear to have been taken by Russian people at the scene of the strike. One 7-second video shows a building in the Atlant Aero facility being completely consumed by flames. Even if that fire is put out, the building will likely be gutted to the point where Russia will have to rebuild or spend weeks, perhaps even months, bringing it back to an acceptable standard. It's unknown if that building is one of Atlant Aero's production facilities. If it is, that might mean that dozens, maybe even hundreds of Molnia drones that would have been built and sent into Ukraine aren't going to be made anymore. That alone makes the SBU's strike worth Ukraine's effort. In a separate Telegram post, Excelenova Plus shares a photo of the massive plume of smoke emanating from the Atlant Aero factory. It also says, "The plant is now one of the key components of Russia's military-industrial complex. It also produces components for combat drones, control systems, and electronic warfare systems. Yet more reason for Ukraine to go after it, as every destroyed cog leads to Russia's military machine operating more sluggishly." New Sky also reports on the scale of the damage that Ukraine's missiles managed to cause on January 13. It says that the Russian authorities have, as usual, tried to pretend that Ukraine's attack was nowhere near as successful as it actually was. The old drone debris excuse hasn't been trotted out because Ukraine used missiles instead of drones. Not that we would put it past Russia to claim that drone debris had somehow caused the fires at Atlant Aero anyway. However, New Sky says that authorities in the Taganrog and Rostov regions have limited themselves to making vague claims about repelling the attack and shooting down targets, all while the plant was being attacked burned. This is akin to Iraq's former information minister, Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, dubbed Comical Ali by some arms of the media, claiming that US forces weren't in Iraq as American tanks actively rolled through the country. You just can't claim to have repelled an attack when the devastating outcome of that attack is clear for all to see. Frankly, Russia should be used to Atlant Aero burning. It's happened before. Ukraine hit the drone facility in Taganrog back in June 2025, as the Kyiv Independent reported at the time. In a surprisingly coy statement about the attack, the head of the Counter-Disinformation Center at Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, Andriy Kovalenko, would only confirm that something had hit the Taganrog facility. Something unknown flew into the Atlant Aero plant in Taganrog, Kovalenko said in June, adding, This is an important node in the Russian military-industrial complex, specializing in components for combat drones and control systems. Kovalenko was clearly enjoying yanking a few chains with that statement, as it's pretty clear that Ukraine was being the something unknown that he talked about, unless Russia attacked itself, and you wouldn't put it past them. For what it's worth, Russian authorities reported that a wave of Ukrainian drones had attacked several regions on the night in question, including the Rostov area where Taganrog is located. Russia claimed to have shot down 40 of these drones, in addition to Rostov Governor Yuri Sliazar, making unsubstantiated claims about Ukraine's drones damaging a sports complex, a high school building, and residential buildings. There were no mentions of Atlant-Aero from Russia in June 2025. The SBU has made it so that Russia has to work much harder to deny the existence of the flaming wreck that the plant has become in January. Atlant-Aero had a pretty bad night, but if you know how Ukraine carries out its long-range attacks, then you've likely guessed that this drone manufacturing facility was far from the only target in Ukraine's sights on January 13. The Kyiv Post confirms this, stating that Ukraine also appears to have scored hits on the Beriev TANTK aircraft plant. Also based in Taganrog, this plant is an important repair and maintenance facility for Russian aircraft, not least because it's in a location that is fairly close to the border that Russia shares with Ukraine. That proximity to Ukraine means the plant is able to make quick repairs on the bombers that Russia uses to assault Ukraine's cities. The SBU has just shown that having a repair and maintenance plant so close to Ukraine just makes that plant all the easier to hit. Ukraine has also hit this plant before. In November, it unleashed a long-range strike on the plant that reportedly destroyed a pair of experimental Russian aircraft, the A-60 and A-100LL. Beyond hosting experimental planes, the TANTK plant is also responsible for repairing Russia's Tu-95MS strategic bombers, along with its A-50 Airborne Early Warning and Control Aircraft, or AEW&C. Being unable to repair the latter will be especially damaging to Russia. A-50s offer eyes in the sky for Russia, allowing it to detect aerial targets that it can take out using fighter jets, missiles, and other munitions. As far back as March 2024, Newsweek was reporting that Russia was running out of these vital aircraft in the wake of Ukraine having destroyed 2 of them since the start of 2024. Russia was believed to have just 6 A-50s left, so being unable to repair those aircraft now means that it won't be able to spot incoming Ukrainian aircraft, missiles, and drones in the future. We said earlier that a double tap was likely coming for Atlant-Aero. Perhaps Ukraine will be keeping tabs on the state of Russia's unmaintained A-50s to figure out what else it can hit too. As if all of this wasn't enough to send Putin reeling, Ukraine's general staff has also confirmed that the country scored several more hits on Russian targets, most of these being in the occupied regions of Ukraine. In a Telegram post, the general staff said that Ukraine had managed to destroy a Tor anti-aircraft system, a P-18-2 Prima radar station, a Tunguska air defense system, and a concentration of Russian forces, all in the Zaporizhia region. In Donetsk, Ukraine also managed to take out an ammunition depot, a Tor system, and another concentration of Russian forces. This was a bruising night for Putin, and its ramifications may be further reaching than he expects. Let's focus on the drones for a moment. Though it's true that the Molnia drones that were the specialization of the Atlant-Aero can only just be classified as long-range drones, the Orion, for which the plant makes components, absolutely is a long-range drone. Odin reports that the drone has a 700-kilometer or 434-mile range, and that it can carry up to 4 guided missiles or bombs, in addition to having a maximum payload of 200 kilograms, or about 440 pounds. So it's fair to say that Ukraine just took out an important facility in the context of Russia's long-range drone campaign, and it needed to. Russia has intensified its use of long-range drones over 2025 and into 2026, to the point where they may now be Putin's best bet for causing damage to Ukraine. The New Voice of Ukraine demonstrated this in a January 13th report in which it said that Armed Conflict Location and Event Data, which is an independent global monitor, claims that Russia launched 26,327 drones at Ukraine in 2025. That's about 10,000 more than Russia launched in 2024, and it amounts to almost 2,194 drones per month. This is a ridiculous figure, and Russia has been using these drones to terrorize Ukraine's civilians as much as it has used them to destroy legitimate military targets. The perfect example comes from a January 13th report in The Guardian, which says that Russia has been targeting Ukraine's energy grid throughout the winter. According to the outlet, daytime temperatures in Kyiv can drop to as low as minus 12 degrees Celsius or 10 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter. Russia has been taking advantage of that fact with strikes that are designed to sap the will to fight and perhaps kill the vulnerable in Ukraine. The US has been taking more of an interest in Russia's long-range strategy of late. Also on January 13th, Al Jazeera reported that the US had accused Russia of partaking in a dangerous and inexplicable escalation of its Ukraine war, with missile and drone strikes seeming to lie at the heart of that escalation. The comments were made by the US Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Tammy Bruce, and they came in the wake of Russia deploying its hypersonic Oreshnik missile in an attack on Ukraine. At a moment of tremendous potential, due only to President Trump's unparalleled commitment to peace around the world, both sides should be seeking ways to de-escalate, Bruce also said. Perhaps President Trump is worried about Putin happily using a nuclear-capable missile against Ukraine. Ukraine will be worried too, though it's the sheer number of drones that Russia has been utilizing that will concern it even more due to the damage they cause over time. Taking out a facility that builds those drones, and especially one that is close enough to Ukraine to enable Russia to quickly build and transport those drones to where they need to be, is a major win, as is Ukraine's use of missiles to do the job. Usually we're reporting on Ukraine using long-range drones when we tell you that the country has completed yet another deep strike against a Russian oil or military facility. This time is different, as the SBU has deployed missiles. We don't know what those missiles are, though News Sky claims that the General Staff of Ukraine has specified that they were Ukrainian-made. But the fact that they're being used at all indicates that Ukraine is growing ever more confident in its stockpiles of long-range damage dealers. Perhaps Ukraine used its modernized Neptune-class missiles, which are certainly capable of reaching Taganrog. Maybe used the homegrown ballistic missiles that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that his country had deployed for the first time, as the war zone reported on December 10th. It might be another missile entirely. The fact that Ukraine now has so many options is what will terrify Putin. We mentioned in the introduction to this video that the missile strike on Atlant Aero was the beginning of a series that rocked Russia on January 13th. But it's much bigger than that. Ukraine's use of its domestically produced missiles means that this strike is just the beginning of a new chapter of the war. A chapter that Putin had hoped would never be written. Ukraine isn't just building long-range missiles anymore, it's using them. And one of Russia's key drone-making facilities has felt their power. More missiles are likely to come. And if the UK delivers on its promises, Ukraine may be able to bolster its domestic missile stockpiles with a new short-range ballistic missile that could devastate targets in the border regions. Project Nightfall is officially off the ground, and the first of these new UK missiles, which are intended for Ukraine, may undergo testing as soon as the end of 2026. Find out more about Project Nightfall and our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more updates on Ukraine's latest successful strikes on Russian territory. And thank you as always for watching.